Welcome back to another episode of the Aquademia podcast. I'm your host, Justin Grant.
And I'm Maddie Cassidy.
And today we sit down with the Executive Director of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers, David Naftzger. He has a ton of valuable insight on how to utilize the whole fish, maximizing the value. And we are doing that here in the United States in the Great Lakes region.
And we mentioned the Great Lakes a lot during this episode, so if you aren't familiar with that region, the Great Lakes are a series of 5 lakes that are located between the U.S. and Canadian border, and they're massive lakes. It's a huge regional feature of the Midwest of the U.S.
It's a great conversation, but before we get into that, remember Aquademia is on X. Follow us at Aquademia Pod. If you want to contact the podcast for any reason, you can do so via our online forum located at globalseafood.org/podcast.
And if you want to show some love, be sure to subscribe to us on whichever podcast platform you're listening to us on.
And we will see you at the end.
Welcome to the Aquademia podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
David, thanks for joining Maddie and I on the Aquademia podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Maddie and I were just sitting down and we were talking about this episode. We were kind of prepping and all this stuff, and we're really, really excited to dive into the 100% Great Lakes Fish Initiative that you're overseeing. And before we jump into any of that, I always like to start off with giving you time to introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your background, maybe how you got to where you are today.
Well, I'm David Naftzger. I'm the Executive Director for the Conference of Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers. Our organization is a partnership of the governors and the premiers from our region. We work on a portfolio of issues related to regional economic development and environmental protection. I've been doing the job unbelievably for over 20 years. It's been a great place to work.
Wow.
Previous to that, I was working in Washington, D.C., doing some government relations work. And it's been a real fun place to work. And this project in particular has been a lot of fun over the last few years.
So what state do you live in now?
I live in the Chicago area in Illinois.
Okay.
Nice.
So we've done a few episodes in the past just talking about how to maximize or utilize the full fish. So depending on what the species was, you would catch it, you would fillet it, and then you would kind of just discard the rest because there wasn't a use for it, or we weren't really being creative and thinking like, hey, this is actually wasteful, and that's not a sustainable method. There's got to be more that we can do. So, David, can you just briefly start talking about this 100% Great Lakes Fish Initiative and just the ins and outs and what it is and what you've been doing over the years with it?
We kicked off the 100% Great Lakes Fish project about 2 years ago. We did an event where we had a celebrity chef in Detroit and challenged him to come up with a menu using everything but the fillet for lake whitefish and walleye.
Wow.
And so that was a great way for us to talk with different people that came to the event, press, food critics, a variety of other people, as a kind of an adjacent way to start talking about this bigger idea, which is we're using the fillet, and there's so many other parts of the fish that have value that can be made into, in this case, a delicious food product, but in other cases, other kinds of things that have value and benefit our region. So since we started the project at that point, we've completed biotechnical testing on 6 different types of species that are caught here in the Great Lakes. We've identified potential value chains that we could put into place. We've prototyped a few cool and new products, so that's been an exciting development. First of their kind things, including protein hydrolysates from walleye heads and frames. We've created collagen from lake whitefish and fish leather from a range of species. So we've made a lot of headway in a relatively short period of time, but as you said, really instituting systemic change is a long process. And we're really encouraged, but we realize this is going to take some time and effort extended over a period of years. And we're committed to that because we really believe in the goal. We've seen the success that you referenced in other parts of the world. And we really believe that we can be at the leading edge of this movement towards more sustainable fisheries and maximizing value that we can draw from them.
So I don't know if it's a relatively new concept, but this has been happening in Iceland, right? So they've had success with their cod fishery with figuring out how to utilize the whole fish. So I know that you're trying to apply some of those similar strategies. Can you talk a little bit about maybe that partnership or how you're able to piggyback off of what they're doing over there in Iceland?
Well, oddly, it's a new idea, but it's an old idea. As we've been working with our tribes in the region in particular, they remind us that for centuries they were using 100% of the fish just as they used 100% of the buffalo. And I saw a great quote not long ago from one of the members of one of our tribes who said, "We were using 100% of the buffalo for centuries. Why on earth aren't we doing that with fish today?"
Yeah.
So that really resonated with me. And while I think in the more modern sense, this idea really was born in Iceland, it's not necessarily a new concept or a new idea. So we've been really fortunate. I was introduced to the Iceland Ocean Cluster really through a happy accident. I was traveling to Europe about 5 years ago and was looking into flights. Happened to be Icelandair, had the least expensive flight, and it allowed me to spend a couple of days in Reykjavik. So while I was there, I started looking into groups that might be doing things that could relate to our work in one way or another. Came across the Iceland Ocean Cluster, met with Thor Sigvason and Alexandra Leeper, and was really so inspired by their vision and what they had accomplished. It took a little while for me to think about how we could apply the Icelandic model here in the Great Lakes because our fisheries are very different. But at the same time, there are a lot of similarities in terms of 40 years ago with the Icelandic cod's collapse and the catch rates really declining and that forcing some innovation and some different approaches, including 100% fish. We've had a very similar situation over the last 5 to 10 years with the lake whitefish, which has been the historic backbone of our fishery. So having that really collapse has, on the one hand, spurred a lot of people to work on doing research and trying to replenish those stocks, but at the same time saying, how can we derive more value out of each fish that we catch, and how can we look at these other species that may not historically have been as important, but to elevate them and to drive more value through them. So the partnership began with that conversation about 5 years ago, and it's really benefited us because we've been able to learn from their model, learn from the structured way that they have approached this issue, beginning with biotechnical testing. And we were fortunate to be able to use the Mattis research lab in Reykjavik to do all of our biotechnical testing. So they've already gone through this exercise with a variety of species, not just in Iceland, but globally. So taking advantage of their expertise rather than trying to reinvent the wheel with someone who may or may not have ever done related work.
Right.
And from there, we've had a series of exchanges with Icelandic experts coming to our region, seeing how our fish are processed and handled. And we've taken a group twice now to Iceland. And in 2 weeks, I'll be leading a group of 12 people from our fish industry to Reykjavik again to meet with companies that are already having success in 100% fish. And then we'll be taking part in the Fish Waste for Profit conference, which will bring together experts from around the world. So I think that idea exchange, the opportunity to learn from each other, will really be beneficial in making those touch points and connections that, but for the Iceland Ocean Cluster, we would have really struggled to ever make happen.
That is amazing. It's so exciting that you'll be able to visit so soon.
Yeah.
So one thing that you were just touching on, which is talking about how the Great Lakes fishery of lake whitefish has almost mimicked, in a way, the collapse of the Icelandic cod fishery. And one thing that we came across when preparing for this episode is that the Great Lakes commercial fishery is described as being undervalued and underutilized. So what are some things that 100% Great Lakes fish is doing to help spread awareness about the economic value of lake whitefish and other species in the Great Lakes?
Well, first, it's helping to educate people and do outreach so people really understand the nature of our fishery. I think especially in global terms, but even in North America, the Great Lakes commercial fishery is not really well understood. We catch every year about 25 to 30 million pounds of fish from the Great Lakes, but that really understates the fishery and the fish economy in the region because we have significant aquaculture in the lakes in Canada. We have significant on land aquaculture facilities. We import a lot of fish from the coasts and from around the world that are being served on restaurant tables in Chicago and New York City and all over the place. So really talking with people to understand and recognize the connections that we can make. We've been very active in terms of visiting fish processors, spending time kind of walking the land, as it were, to really understand from the water to the processing table to the back door, how is it that they are working with these fish? How is it that the value is being generated? How does that accrue to the fisherman versus the processor versus the wholesaler, the distributor, whomever? It's a complex economy, and it really requires a deeper understanding in order to think about activating a new way of doing things like 100% fish. So we've been learning from those who really know it best, those who have been fishing and caring for our waters in many cases for generations, especially our tribes. We've done a series of reports on the fish that we've done the biotechnical testing for, and that includes all of the major species. Those are all available on our website at www.gsgp.org. And we've done a series of webinars where we've invited people to learn from the experts. In some cases, that's people from Iceland. In other cases, it's people that are doing interesting things in Eastern Canada or Alaska or wherever the case might be. So this is going to be a long process, but we've been really heartened in particular with our outreach around the 100% Great Lakes Fish Pledge. This was something that we kicked off about a year ago, and it was an opportunity for companies to commit to 100% utilization by the end of 2025. Some of the signatory companies are already there, which is terrific. In that case, we're helping them to move up the value chain. So if they're using their fish raw material for compost or animal feed, how can we move them up to be making protein hydrolysates or collagen or other things that have a higher value?
Right.
And for those companies that are not already using 100%, we work with them to identify their current waste streams and think about how we can create those into value streams. And we've had a great response. We have almost 30 companies on board now, including nearly all of our major processors. And that's been a real success. And I think telegraphs to the broader community that there's raw material available. There's a group of companies that are looking for partners, and we need to start activating this so that we really can maximize the value of our commercial fishery.
So I'll just back up just a little bit, and just the fact that you said within a relatively short amount of time you have over 30 companies that are already doing that. I think that's really impressive. I also have been thinking more on a global scale too, right? So we've pinpointed a few regions in the world that are doing this, and there's probably more, we're just not aware of it, that this initiative could become very widespread. And I just think that we need to continue to do kind of what we're doing right here on the podcast, is bringing awareness of the value and then pushing this out as far as we can, because it's so important.
Absolutely. And I will say for some companies, it is harder to start than you might think. We have a very dispersed fishery, ranging from very rural communities in Western Ontario or the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to some that are maybe much better positioned in terms of a cluster in Southwestern Ontario near Detroit or Windsor. And if you're in a rural area where there's not significant agriculture, compost isn't really an option. Trying to sell into the pet food market is challenging because of the remoteness and the lack of trucking options. So I've been surprised at the diversity that is required to really operationalize a 100% fish strategy on a regional scale. It's not like Iceland where it's pretty compact location with huge volumes. We've got a lot of smaller processors that are pretty far out places.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we're going to backtrack a little bit here about the partnership and the learnings that you've had with the Iceland Ocean Cluster. So how has this partnership influenced your approach? And is there any other learnings that you haven't mentioned so far that you want to kind of bring out on this episode?
I think one of the most important things that we've been able to benefit from with our partnership with the Iceland Ocean Cluster has been their very structured approach. And we are looking to emulate that now. We just recently received a grant from the Great Lakes Fishery Trust, and we've created a partnership that includes the Iceland Ocean Cluster, as well as a major fishery consulting company from Eastern Canada, TFC, Trinaf Fisheries Consultants. And we're working with Ivy Business School at Western University, which for American listeners who may not be familiar, is one of the top 10 business schools in North America with deep expertise in sustainability, upcycling, and some work that really dovetails nicely with 100% fish. So over the course of the next year, we're beginning by doing a raw material map. And so this will identify where is the raw material. I don't use the word waste, but other people may view it that way. So where is this material being generated? Where can we put it on a map? And then where can we start to aggregate enough volume that will make some of these 100% fish strategies economical? From the raw material mapping, we're going to be doing a value chain analysis. So we're going to be looking at, for example, collagen. We don't have fish collagen being made in the region today, but we do have bovine and porcine collagen. Might there be an adjacency there so that those producers could be taking fish as an input? Or for those that are making fish-based collagen, perhaps on the coasts, can we connect our collagen supply and skin and scales into those markets? So that's part of the analysis. We then will be doing a demand analysis looking both in the region and globally, and the Iceland Ocean Cluster will be leading the work on the global demand analysis. Where are markets growing? Where can we sell into markets? Because anytime you're trying to create a new market, it's very difficult. You can look at the experience of trying to sell invasive big head and silver carp into the food market. There's had to be a rebranding, and it's just more time consuming and more challenging. So looking at that demand piece, we'll then be doing an environmental and economic benefits overview. So which of these potential value chains is optimal for creating the most revenue and being the most environmentally sustainable? What does transportation look like? What are waste streams that are generated from the production process, et cetera? And then lastly, we're going to be creating a series of recommendations for government and for industry. Is there financial support that's needed? Are there policy measures that are needed to encourage activation of some of these strategies? So we're looking forward to the next leadership summit of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence governors and premiers, which will be next October in Quebec City, where we'll be announcing an action plan stemming from all of this work. And we really see that as the big springboard to activating this and really helping to make this more real.
Right. So it doesn't sound like you're very busy.
This is only one of our projects too. But it's been a lot of fun. You know, I wouldn't be spending so much time on this if it weren't fun. It's connecting people who haven't worked together, connecting with groups in Iceland. People shake their head and say, how on earth did you connect with these people? Why are you talking to people in Iceland? But I've found through the course of my career that you can find great ideas all over the place if you know where to look. And you're going to strike out some of the time, but when you start making a few hits, you're going to get a home run once in a while.
Right.
It seems like it's almost like putting pieces of a puzzle together. It's like there's this stream over here that we could connect with this one, and no one has ever thought of connecting them before, but it seems like they could actually dovetail quite nicely together. So I feel like that aspect of it would be really challenging, but also make for a really interesting day-to-day job.
I think that's a great analogy. And the fish industry, as much or more than any, has historically been kind of inward looking, not great with sharing information, whether that's guarding a place where you're catching the fish that day or what you're doing with it. Historically, I think there's been a reticence to collaborate and really be transparent. So we've had to overcome a little bit of that, but I think one of our learnings from the first year is if you can really connect with people where they are, help them to understand what's in it for them. For some, that's really focused around revenue. We're struggling with revenue, and if this is one more way I can get some money into the company, that's great. For others, it's really motivated by environmental sustainability, and others, may have different motivations altogether. But really understanding that, and then, like you said, kind of connecting those pieces of the puzzle in a way that benefits everyone. And that's where I think our organization is uniquely positioned as kind of a neutral party, looking at this really from a standpoint of public benefit and public interest.
So in discussing all of these diverse streams of material that you were mentioning before, and also knowing that your region that you're focused on has really rural areas, how do you see the 100% Great Lakes Fish Initiative supporting local jobs and maybe even creating new jobs and supporting local economies there?
It's going to look a little bit different in different locations. I think in some cases it's going to be a matter of transporting raw material to another location. Some strategies for 100% fish simply require a certain volume to be economical. That would include products like fish meal and oil. If you're not pushing millions of pounds through a facility in a given year, you'll never be able to rationalize the equipment and capital costs of setting up a facility. So that's going to be a good solution in some locations. In others, it's going to be more artisanal, smaller scale products. Fish leather, we already have one producer in the region who's doing some really cool work with fish leather. I'm actually wearing a fish leather belt right now that he made.
So cool.
So that's one opportunity. And I just mentioned as an aside, we had a really fun activity about 3 months ago. We did a fish leather tanning workshop on one of the tribal reservations in northern Michigan. And this was a historic craft that tribes used to create fish leather that could be used for footwear and other kinds of things. And in this particular tribe, there was an older woman that remembered doing it as a younger person. And then we had a handful of young people that were there learning it for the first time. Cool. That was a really neat thing for us to roll up our sleeves, work with a bunch of fish skins, make a mess, but have some fun. And at the end of the day, have something that could be made into a product for sale. So that's kind of a roundabout way of saying I think it's going to be, different in different places. But that whole spectrum is where I think there are opportunities. If a fish processor wants to become active in creating a partnership and being an investor and setting up a factory, they can do that. If they just want to be someone who sells material to someone else, they can do that. But part of this analysis that we'll be doing with the Ivy Business School, and part of why we chose to work with them, is really looking at how can we generate value across the value chain, because there needs to be something in this for everyone. The fishermen who are currently struggling to make a living because of declining catch, the processors that are struggling because volume is down and they're not able to get the species that are most valuable, the processors, et cetera. So again, that's a unique kind of value that we can bring to this, as really looking from the whole public interest. We're not just aligned with one element, the fishers or the processors or the Ontario industry or the Michigan industry or whatever it might be. We're really looking at this from a regional perspective and trying to maximize value, create more jobs, et cetera. And I think on the job front, there's a lot of possibilities. I visited a facility a few years ago in rural Iceland that was drying fish heads and frames, and they're shipping them to West Africa to be used for soups and things. Middle of nowhere in Iceland, and there's 40 people, working in a factory, having a high-paid job. So if we can emulate some of that, I think there's really going to be a great opportunity. And in a rural community, if you can bring 5 or 10 or 40 jobs, that can make a really big difference.
Absolutely. Yep. It kind of goes back to your point, Maddie, too, of just making those connections, and sometimes you don't know where you're going to find them, but they are out there. So,
sure.
David, you definitely have talked about stuff that's coming in the future, things that you're currently working on now, but I want to revisit what's next. If there's anything else, is there any upcoming projects or anything, any collaborations that you can share with us? I don't know if there's anything that's top secret, but is there anything that you're excited about that's on the horizon that you want to mention to our listeners?
Most immediately, taking the group to Iceland, which I mentioned, that'll be a really great opportunity. Then on October 1st, we're having another head to tail Great Lakes Fish Challenge. This one will be a little bit different. We are partnering with the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee and Wisconsin Sea Grant. So this is an opportunity to work with a creative chef to use food to introduce the 100% fish concept. But we're also going to be showcasing a range of products. I ordered a case of fish collagen beverage, Collab from Iceland. So we'll be enjoying that with our fish. We also will have some commercial fish processors who are going to be there showing some of the things that they're doing, including liquid fertilizer, compost. There's probably some other products I'm missing, but showcasing what's already being done. And then we'll have a table of things that I've been able to collect over the last 2 years to show kind of what can be done. Showing collagen that we've gotten from Iceland, showing some cosmetics that are from Iceland as well, and other things like that, so that you can really see the spectrum of where are we, where could we go, and that tends to really ignite some excitement and enthusiasm. And then lastly, I would mention in the spring, we have a goal to plant 250 million trees in the region over the next 10 years. And connecting that with 100% fish, we're going to be doing a tree planting in the spring where we're going to be using liquid fertilizer that's being made from fish. I have to keep stopping myself from using the term waste.
Right.
Parts of the fish other than
byproducts.
The fillet. Byproducts, exactly.
Yep.
So we've got one of the tribes who's just starting to get into that market. So we'll be talking about that, as well as an incumbent producer who's been doing this for a long time. But
that is really cool.
Yeah,
that is some great synergy.
Doing some different pieces of the puzzle, like you said.
So one question that's coming to mind is, one prominent feature of the Great Lakes is that it straddles two countries, right? It's in the US and it's also Canada. And I'm wondering if you've run into any challenges from that perspective of having to deal with two countries in a smaller region.
The industries historically have been rather disconnected, and so getting a conversation started and deepening among the different interests. There's a lot of disagreements about quota and catch rates and things of that nature. So, overcoming some of that historical kind of separation, I'll call it, or disconnection, and really helping people to understand that they're all in this together. And working together benefits everyone. So I think that's been a bit of a challenge. At a practical level, getting raw material across the border has been a challenge. We hosted Thor Sigfusson, the founder of the Iceland Ocean Cluster, about 1.5 years ago. And as we were crossing the border, they asked us if we had anything to declare and so on. And we said no. And Thor had brought along this fish collagen that had been made from lake whitefish. If you've ever crossed the border with a small container of a white powder, it can raise a lot of questions. So he, of course, had to explain to them what it was and so on. And so we were able to move along without any issue. But shipping fish across the border has been an issue in terms of doing testing. There's different certifications and kind of animal plant health inspection requirements. So some of those issues have just required a little bit of a growing pain. But after you've done these kinds of things once or twice, the third or fourth time becomes fairly routine.
Yep. It's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, and I guess as you kind of broke down some of those barriers that you've had to deal with, it actually makes a lot of sense. And a lot of those things I was actually already thinking of, right? Like the just different regulations to begin with quotas and things of that nature. But like you said, it all comes down to, we're all in this together. This is the value. Let's work together and pick where we want to be in the future, and let's both work to get there.
Yeah, and I think another interesting challenge but opportunity beyond just the two countries, we have dozens of tribal nations in the region. And so bringing them together with the states, and again, there's been some disagreements historically about catch and quota and different issues like that. and then the sport fishermen as well, who
Yep.
have been a whole other angle. It's been interesting to discover these fish cleaning stations that are all over the place, where sport fishermen are putting their non-fillet parts of the fish, byproducts,
Yep.
and in some cases, those are already being collected and being put into 100% fish strategies, principally pet food. In other cases, though, they are going into municipal landfill. So that's another kind of raw material supply chain that we're connecting. Another one is that in the fall, we have a large number of fish that will go to spawn and die in streams. And right now, a lot of those are being landfilled. So that's another opportunity where we can bring more raw material to some of these volume-based strategies like fish meal and oil.
And that just goes to show how important the outreach and the communication piece is in it.
Absolutely. And changing the mindset. This isn't waste that goes into a bucket. This is
Right.
valuable, and reminds me of one of the things that it's just vivid in my mind. When Thor Sigfusson visited us about 18 months ago, we traveled to a number of fish processors and saw how things were being done very much like 100 years ago. People over a table using knives and
Yep.
removing the fillet, and then the rest of the material just going on the ground.
Mhm.
And he got down on his knees and came up with 2 full hands of fish guts and said, "I cannot believe you're throwing this away. This is the most valuable part of the fish." And that was kind of a light bulb moment, I think, for us to see. But it's kind of inspiring, all of the work that we're doing.
Right. That's kind of a powerful
Totally.
image, and I'm glad that you were able to get to that point in this episode to be able to give our listeners kind of that visual.
Yeah, and inertia is a very powerful thing. We've always done it this way. Isn't necessarily a good answer when the global seafood marketplace is changing, the fishery is changing. How we did it 100 years ago may not be sufficient for the next 100 years, and
Right.
that is a hard idea for people to get when the fishery's been in the family for 5 generations, and they've always done it this way, and it's always worked, and given them prosperity.
Yep. It comes down to a lot of the points, David, that you talked about earlier on in the episode too, of what motivates people. And a lot of times it can be revenue, and you're a fishing family, you rely on a certain quota and making this much money, and now regulations have diminished what your quota was, the money's not coming in, and so that can be really frustrating.
One of the cool things that we've also learned, one of the main goals for the project, is to increase the sustainability of our fisheries overall. We've been historically reliant on a very small number of species, principally the lake whitefish, but also walleye, yellow perch, and lake trout. And at the encouragement of one of our tribes, we did biotechnical testing on the white sucker, which is not a target species typically. It has very low value, but with the biotechnical testing, it actually had a lot of similar profiles to those target fish. And so looking at ways we could valorize the white sucker, fish meal and oil, collagen, protein hydrolysates, leather, these are the same kinds of product opportunities that we have for our principal target fish. So we're excited about that, and looking at that as a way to diversify the species that fishermen are targeting that can take pressure off of the target species that are more highly valued as fillet. And we are thinking about that in terms of some other species like freshwater drum, white perch, and others that again are abundant in the fishery, but not targeted and generally ignored. And if they are caught, they become a challenge for them to have to manage.
Given how much time we've navigated through most of the questions that we want to ask you, David, but I always ask our guests, is there anything else today that you want to get out to our audience while you have the platform?
It's been a good conversation. Nothing immediately comes to mind, but I will just say it's been a lot of fun to work on this project. It's required creativity, imagination, working with a lot of non-traditional partners, but building on some relationships that we had before. And I think that opportunity to build the puzzle, like you said, Maddie, from pieces that have lied on the table, separated for a long time, has been a lot of fun. That problem solving is really gratifying to see come together. And in a relatively short period of time, I think we've had a lot of success. We've certainly created the smoke and gotten people excited. And now we need to deliver with the fire. And I think the next 12 to 24 months are going to be a real opportunity to do that. At our governors and premiers meeting next fall, we're going to be launching an agenda for growth and really looking at ways that we can grow our blue economy, ways that we're harnessing our water in economically sustainable ways that can create jobs and support our regional economy. So I really think the fishery is an exciting opportunity in that regard. It's a traditional industry, but it's one that, as we've seen in Iceland, can really push new boundaries, bring together people who've never worked with fish from the fashion industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical device industry, et cetera. And all of that really takes advantage of some of our other strengths within the region. So I think that this is going to be something we can really build on over time, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, we really appreciate that you were able to take the time this morning to sit down with us and tell us everything that you've been working on and things that you will be working on in the future. And I know I'm personally going to be following along on your journey and seeing all the progress that you're continuing to make. So it's very, very exciting. And everything that you mentioned that has a website or link, we will make sure to add that to our show notes so our listeners will be able to easily navigate to that. Which brings me actually to one of my last points, which I forgot to mention, which is, David, if there's any of our listeners that want to get involved or want to be able to contact you, what is the best way that they can do that?
Please visit our website. It's www.gsgp.org. You can find my contact information there. You can also find all of the reports that I referenced, as well as some other materials about the 100% Fish Initiative. Includes a lot of work product from some of our partners, including the Iceland Ocean Cluster. We've been very fortunate to have financial support for this work from the Great Lakes Fishery Trust, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, and the Ontario Commercial Fisheries Association. So those are some other resources where you can find information about the project and how it connects with some of the other work that they're involved with.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, David. This was such a great conversation. I've dipped my toe into learning about 100% fish in the past, and I feel like now I'm even more intrigued, and there's so many more questions that I have, but this was such a great starting point. So thank you so much for educating us and our listeners today.
Yeah, thank you. And if you ever want to see it firsthand, please visit our region and enjoy some Great Lakes fish while you're here.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Folks, that was our conversation with David Naftzger. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I did. I want to remind everyone to follow us on X if you're not already, at Aquademia Pod. If you want to contact the podcast for any reason, you can do so with our online forum located at globalseafood.org/podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a rating and review for us.
And we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Ciao.